in the AFC East, but we have to send the Dolphins packing early this season. They are going to be looking into their draft board early on in the season. We have the Bills moving on to the divisional round of the playoffs. All other teams in the AFC East are eliminated from the competition. We'll talk about the playoffs and the games this week. We'll also get into a lot of other things right after we hit the intro. Welcome in, everyone. Welcome back to the AFC East Summit presented by Nickel City Mafia, where our family business is football. I am joined by two awesome correspondents. We are missing our New England Patriots correspondent. I think he's a little bit either excited or he's disappointed in the hiring of Gerard Mayo, but we have two other guys that are on the show ready to give you all the football talk throughout the day. I'm joined by good friends of mine. Anthony Warchild is what he likes to be called. He's more of the Warchild. And I'm also represented by Dolphin Keith, who is the Dolphins fan. Obviously, if you don't know, Anthony is the Jets correspondent. So we have the Jets correspondent there in the middle and Keith with his Miami Dolphins hoodie on as well. And I am obviously Brett McDurphy, representing the Go Bills podcast as well as the Buffalo Bills. So let me start with Anthony. Just say hi to the viewers. How you doing, man?
Well, I'm doing fine. It was a pretty exciting wild card round, especially when you're in neutral. So like, you don't really care. You're just looking for good football. And I felt like this wild card weekend was pretty epic. At first, I mean, obviously, like the Bills game gets snowed out. Then we get we'll get into the games, I'm sure, individually, but like as the neutral, there's some pretty interesting football played. A lot of stuff that I wasn't expecting to see happen. So that's cool.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. Keith, what's your thoughts, man? I mean, obviously, it was not talk about the Dolphins yet, but overall, how did you feel how the the wild card weekend went?
Yeah, I mean, it was exciting. It's playoffs are always great, but a lot of the games left a lot to be desired. You know, there was blowouts in, I'd say, 4 of the 6 games. You know, and you know, you like to see better football in January than that, but the best teams moved on, I guess. You know, I was, we'll get into this, I'm sure, but I was disappointed in the Cowboys' performance.
Yeah,
I thought they would avail themselves better than that. The Packers really came in there and blew their doors off.
Yeah.
But we'll get into all that.
Oh yeah. And listen, this was Super Wildcard weekend. Some of the teams eliminated are teams that we kind of had a feeling that were, and this is no disrespect to anybody that made the playoffs. Listen, every team that made the playoffs, they were great in every aspect. But some of the teams that are moving on, these are the teams that we figured would be around later. I wouldn't expect the Green Bay Packers, obviously, but most of the teams that are around are the ones that we figured to be around, especially in the AFC side. But let's talk about number one, the Miami Dolphins. We have a few questions for you, Keith. I'm going to kick off the show with you, man, because you are the life of the party. You're the one that always likes to talk about your Miami Dolphins. Let's talk about that Chiefs-Dolphins game. And we have a few questions for you. Number one, from Battlehawks super fan coming in, which is Mad Chatter, as I like to call him. Keith, do you miss the Fins?
Well, yeah, I'm disappointed in this season. I said last week it's been 23 years since I've seen a playoff victory. Looks like it's going to be at least 24 now. I wanted to see a playoff victory first and foremost from the Dolphins this season. It was a disappointing, but not all that surprising performance by the Dolphins in this game. They couldn't get a lot going on offense. Their defense was undermanned. They did the best they could do. But, under the circumstances, in the weather that they were in, all things considered, the Dolphins just didn't have enough steam at the end of the season, offensively or defensively. A lot of blame can go on Tua. It's incumbent upon a quarterback to elevate a football team when, under these circumstances, and he didn't do it. But I can't put it all on Tua. The interior offensive line was into his lap every time he tried to throw. The tackles didn't really even play all that well. Teron Armstead didn't have his best game. Austin Jackson certainly didn't have his best game. It was just a poor offensive performance overall. And, into his defense, if you're not given the time to throw, if you're not given the space to throw, you're not going to make the good throw. You're not going to make the correct throws. Going into this off season, what I want to see from the Dolphins, I still think Tua can be the guy personally. Every off season, Tua has been given a task, whether it be rehab your hip or work on your deep ball or learn how to fall better so you can stay healthy or add some weight so you can be stronger. Every offseason, he's been given a task, and every offseason, he's come back as a better quarterback for completing that task. The year they got Tyreek Hill, they said, well, you have to throw a better deep ball because we just got you the fastest receiver in football. Last offseason, he took jiu-jitsu so he could fall better to help curb those concussions. Going into this offseason, what the Dolphins need to have a focus on, and I have full confidence that he's going to focus on it, is how to make plays when the pocket breaks down.
Yeah.
How to get outside of the pocket and throw the ball. First, the Dolphins need to shore up the offensive line. That goes without saying. But he needs to avoid pressure, get outside the pocket, make some throws, slide within the pocket, make some throws. These are things that Tua needs. These are very concrete things that Tua needs to work on this offseason. I have full confidence that he will, because he has a great work ethic. He has a prodigious work ethic. He's going to get to work, almost as soon as he possibly can. And offensively, that's what the Dolphins need to work on. They need to work on their offensive line. And, they had a rash of injuries, maybe not as bad as the Jets, but still pretty bad. Still a lot of injuries they had to deal with on the line this year. So shore up the offensive line, and Tua needs to learn how to play off script a little bit and go through his progressions a little bit more. And if he does that, I think Tua is going to become a better quarterback for it. I still think Tua can be the guy. I really do. But, to the naysayers out there, I'm sure there's plenty of them, especially out in the chat. And, if you disagree with me, please let me know. But to the naysayers out there, I would say just stay tuned, because Tua's going to come back and he's going to be better. And, next season is another season. What do you guys think? I rambled on for too long.
Hey, no, listen, you got to talk about your team. That's the biggest thing. So I'm going to turn it over to Anthony and let him talk. And then I'm going to give you my thoughts. And then I want to go over a lot of the free agents that you guys are going to have, because you have a ton of free agents in the 2024 offseason. I also want to get into the Jets too. I feel like, it's not fair that you don't get to talk about some of the Jets free agents as well. So I want to get into that and talk about some of the free agents that you guys would like to re-sign too. But let's start with the Dolphins and talking about them.
Okay, so I just went back and rewatched the game a couple of hours ago just to prep up before the show. And one of the things that impressed me the most was that the Dolphins, especially on defense, didn't really ever stop playing. Functionally, with the exception of that field goal at the very end of the first half, that game was a one-score game for the first half of the football game. Most of the problems that I saw were along the offensive line for the Dolphins. They simply, most of the game, they couldn't move anybody. Because they couldn't move anybody, they couldn't get the running game going. When Tua was pressured fast. They got into him really, really quickly. Some of those times he could get the ball up, but a lot of those times He either had to throw the ball away or he did tuck and run for a couple of first downs, which was nice. Generally speaking, I got the sense that the weather played a really, really large factor in it because the Dolphins would start drives very well. Tua's first 2, 3, 4 throws would look pretty decent. He'd be on the mark, but the longer that the drive went, I don't know if you guys are all cold weather guys.
Yeah.
You live in Chicago, you live in Philly, you live in Buffalo, right?
No, I live in Florida, so all the guys. But I mean, I've been in the cold weather. Okay, I'm not gonna deny.
Yeah, whatever. You're a snow virgin. Back to work. So when you get down to like the low 10s and your hands are exposed, they stop working. Like you go to pick something up and you literally can't do it. Now, for that game, it was -20. Tua had gloves on, but you get to -20 and gloves don't even matter anymore. Tua's got small hands for a quarterback. He's like bottom 5, bottom 10% in hand size for a quarterback. You would see that you progress into the drive, maybe 8, 10 plays, and all of a sudden Tua's missing. And in the second half, it was even worse. It was maybe 4 or 5 plays into the drive that all of a sudden he's just missing layups for Tua. Missing him left, missing him right, missing Mostert in the flat. He threw 2 throws into the flat that were almost fumbles. Like he almost threw them behind the receiver. So I feel like the weather played a massive, massive impact. I don't know how many drops the Dolphins had, but there were a lot. I mean, even Kelsey, who's kind of used to playing in the cold, he had a few drops, especially early in the game. So when they couldn't get the running game going and they couldn't sustain a drive with the passing game long enough, all you have left are explosives. And like I said, you have no explosives out of the run game because they can't get it going. So now all you have are 2 arm punts.
Yeah.
And functionally, that's not a way to sustain an offense against a championship caliber team.
Right.
I'll say this though, Anthony.
Yeah.
I'll say this, and I agree with you. The weather absolutely played a factor in this game. But you know what? If the Dolphins didn't want to play in -10-degree weather, they should have beaten the Bills.
They should have beaten the Titans.
Or the Ravens. Or the
Titans. Go back to the Titans game, and they could have won that game. And now we're looking at a team that wins the division. They have the game at home. It's at Miami.
Yes.
It's the Bills playing on the road -20 against the Chiefs.
Right.
And so we'll get into the Bills game a little bit later, but yeah, go ahead.
The Dolphins were playing in such terrible weather; they only had themselves to blame for that.
For sure. Going forward, though, I do get the sense that, like I said this at the beginning of the year, I felt like the Dolphins were a relatively under-talented team. They've missed first-round picks for 2 or 3 years in a row now for various reasons, for the Tyreek Hill trade, for the suspension, for against Stephen Ross. Like it's kind of an under-talented team, and they punched above their weight for most of the year. You could see when they play against more talented teams that they just kind of get leaned on sometimes. I would like to see them improve going forward, but they didn't quit, which is awesome because like they were down 3 scores early in the third quarter, and they kept it pretty close. They kept trying to come back. They just couldn't sustain a drive. So head needs to stay high, Keith. For real. Like, this is only year 2 of the McDaniel era. He's not going anywhere. He's one of the youngest coaches in the NFL. Tua is only 26, 27 years old. He's not going anywhere. All the people talking about moving on, just find a new hobby. Football's a long game sport.
That's not the tune I'm singing. I don't think we should move on. I just think that, first and foremost, put an offensive line in front of Tua.
For sure.
Teron Armstead was talking about retirement. That's going to be a big loss if he leaves.
It's a hell of a draft class for offensive tackle. It's a hell of a draft class for offensive tackle.
But the Dolphins also need interior linemen as well. They might lose Robert Hunt in free agency. Isaiah Wynn is going to be a free agent. Connor Williams is going to be a free agent. In fact, the only 2 guys they have signed next season are Teron Armstead and Austin Jackson on the right side. And Teron Armstead might retire. So we could be looking at a completely different, completely new offensive line for the Dolphins next year. And it's not as though they exactly have the cap space to go about filling out this offensive line. So they need to in the draft, they need to invest heavily
Mhm.
in their offensive line and maybe try to re-sign one of those interior guys. Robert Hunt would be great. I want them to re-sign Robert Hunt.
Yeah.
So let's get into the free agency for the Dolphins. And as of right now, I'm just looking at over the cap numbers. This is what they're projecting the salary cap to be next season. They are going to be negative $42 million in the red for their cap space. They have a ton of free agents that they need to sign, starting off with probably their biggest free agent that they'll have to sign, which is going to be Christian Wilkins. I imagine that they're going to clear a lot of cap space. Obviously, there's going to be ways that they can do that by restructures as well as contract extensions. But this Dolphins team has a ton of players that are going to be free agents, such as Braxton Berrios, Robbie Chosen, Chase Claypool.
Let all those guys go. Bring back Wilkins, bring back the offensive line. And as far as their cap space goes, Brett, like they're going to cut Xavier Howard. That's a huge cut. He's going to be a post June 1 cut. They're going to cut Jerome Baker. That's going to be another one that's going to be. They'll probably restructure Tyreek Hill. If Teron Armstead sticks around, they'll restructure him. They might even restructure Bradley Chubb. Yeah. There are ways for them to create cap space. I'm not overly concerned about cap space this season. Next season, we're going to be in like Saints territory where they just had to jettison all of their talent. But this season, I'm not overly concerned about the cap space because they're going to be able to cut some guys, restructure some guys. And I imagine they're going to franchise Christian Wilkins and try and work out a long-term deal with him. That's what I would do if I was Chris Grier. But they can't let Christian Wilkins go. He's one of the best defensive tackles in the league. I'd say he's a top 5 defensive tackle in the league right now. You can't let that man walk out the door for anything. He wanted $20 million. He might get $20 million. The Dolphins kind of balked at that number last year, but he might get that $20 million.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine he's going to get more than $20 million. I really do. I mean, he's one of the
fan. Andrew Van Ginkel, another one that they need to re-sign. Just a ton. There's a ton of guys, Brett. Like you said, there's a ton of dudes. But like the Robbie Chosens and the Eli Apples and the
Berrioses.
Yeah, you can go. It's all right. You can go try and find another team, and then Dolphins will come back. They'll be here when you want to accept the vet minimum.
Yeah. I mean, listen, like I said, there's a ton of players that are going to have to be re-signed. You're going to have to be able to get some restructures. You're going to have to make some trades, obviously. I imagine that some of those players that you're mentioning in Xavier Howard, as well as Jerome Baker, I think that there's going to be at least some type of market for them in the trade market. Maybe you can get a draft pick or something.
Not their numbers, Brett.
Not their numbers.
Nobody's trading for them.
But maybe you get a late round draft pick, let's say a 6th or a 7th round draft pick for them. That's still something. I'm just saying, you might have to take on a little bit of the money and just to get something for them. But that very well could happen. Don't be surprised.
Red, White, and Bill's commented Wilkins to the Pats. No, Sean. No.
No. Christian Wilkins next to Christian Barmore.
That would break my heart. If he went to another AFC, that would absolutely break my heart to see Christian Wilkins in one of those uniforms.
No, he's getting re-signed. He's too much of a franchise player. Yeah. And players want to stay. They want to stay in Miami. You can tell they want to play for McDaniel.
But like you said, Anthony, he's super important to the locker room too. Everybody loves him. He's such a leader. You can't let a guy like that walk out the door.
No, you drafted him. You've developed him. He's been there. Like now this is gonna be his 5th year. Like no, you keep him. He's phenomenal.
Absolutely.
You keep players like that around.
Absolutely.
But let's move on to the Jets side of things. And, number one, you guys are going to be running it back with
Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers, obviously, your head coach in Robert Saleh, as well as your offensive and defensive coordinators, which, a little bit of a surprise. I'm not going to lie, okay? I'm just going to be honest with you.
I don't think it's that big of a surprise because this is Aaron Rodgers, the GM.
Yeah.
He picks his coaches. If not, To be honest with you, they just fired Luke Getsy from Chicago. Do not be shocked. Do not be shocked if he comes back to be like quarterback coach or something.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised either, though. But listen, you guys have a lot of moves that you're going to have to make, too. You got a couple of free agents here that are expecting very high value as well. Let's start off with Carl Lawson as well.
Carl Lawson's going to get cut.
I mean, you don't think he's going to stay?
No. We drafted defensive end 2 years in a row in the first round. Carl Lawson's gone.
All right, let's move on to Dwayne Brown.
Dwayne Brown his contract, I think, is either up or he has 1 year left and it's just paper money. We're going to cut him. We're going to still get a $9 million or something cap hit from him, which just is a kick in the nuts. But, yeah, he's gone.
All right, moving on to someone who had 3 interceptions in the first game of the season against the Buffalo Bills, Jordan Whitehead.
Yeah, Whitehead's coming back.
I imagine he will. So, all right, let's look into Chuck Clark, who was out for the season.
Yeah, usually, I mean, they have a history of, like, bringing back guys that get hurt, like, day one. Like, not just with Aaron Rodgers, not just with Chuck Clark, but there was, like, another safety that we had a couple of years ago. I forget his name. I don't think they're going to bring back Chuck Clark, if only because Ashton Davis came out of his 4th year. He finally had a breakout year. So, like, you've got Ashton Davis, you've got Tony Adams, you've got Jordan Whitehead. You're not going to spend money.
I didn't see that coming from Ashton Davis either, Anthony.
What's up?
I didn't see that coming from Ashton Davis either. That was
he was phenomenal towards the end of the year. Yeah. He was absolutely fantastic. If anything, it's possible they could bring back Chuck Clark and not bring back Jordan Whitehead, but I don't expect that because this coaching, like Ulbrich and Saleh, specifically targeted Jordan Whitehead. Like, they've liked him for years. So, like, Saleh doesn't give up on his guys. He gives up on guys that aren't his guys.
Yeah.
That's a separate issue.
So let's move on to probably one of the bigger free agents that the the team has, which is going to be another defensive end that they have. And listen, I'm going to tell you this right now. He is not taking a hometown discount. He's already said that. Let's move on to Bryce Huff.
Yeah, the hometown discount thing is a myth anyway. Like, guys don't take a hometown discount. They take what market rate is. He's not coming back because he's not one of Saleh's guys. You know how I know he wasn't one of Saleh's guys? Saleh got here and he never played. He didn't play his first year, which I think was under Greg Williams. Second year under Saleh, barely played at all. Third year, which was last year, and he played a little bit and had an elite pass rush grade in the tiny little bit that he played, like 15% of snaps or something like that. And then this year, got up to 40% of snaps, and those pass rush grades stayed the exact same. Regardless, they drafted McDonald. Like, they're not going to spend money on Bryce Huff, and good for Bryce Huff. I want Bryce Huff to go up there and get as much money as he can. I think he's going to get something close to the Carl Lawson deal. Carl Lawson and Trey Hendrickson were free agents a couple of years ago at the exact same time. I think he's going to get adjusted for inflation about that, $17 to $20 million for 3 years. I think the first 2 years are going to be guaranteed. Third year, he's going to look for a bigger contract because I think the dude's elite, and I think that Saleh's wasted a lot of his prime.
Yeah, but listen, he is a good player too. I wouldn't expect him to take less than probably $9 or $10 million.
I actually have a spot for him. I think he ends up with Eberflus out in Chicago.
I think that's a great spot for him.
That is a good spot for him.
I would really like to see that. Let's move on to the offensive side of the ball, talking about a couple of free agents. I'm not going to get into a couple of these players. Just because, their value is a little less than everything. They're not role players, but I'm trying to get into the main players for you guys. Number one, let's start with your offensive line in Connor McGovern. The other Connor McGovern, don't confuse him with the guard for the Buffalo Bills, but this is center Connor McGovern for the New York Jets.
I think they're going to bring him back. He came back last year. It was just like $3 million, which is like about as cheap as you can get, I think, a starting caliber-ish center. Tippmann is the center of the future, but they might need him just to play guard. So I expect Tippmann's I expect they're going to bring McGovern back for a similar salary, like $3 million. He's an injured older vet anyway, so I couldn't imagine a whole lot of teams that are like just dying to pounce on him.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you.
Take him, Anthony.
Hey, listen, you said it.
Keith with the jokes.
You said it, Keith. I'm not going to say anything about that. But let's move on to a right tackle here. 32-year-old right tackle Billy Turner.
Yeah, I don't know. Billy Turner seems to have a cool handshake with Aaron Rodgers. I imagine he's going to get brought back. Was he on like $1 million or something like that? He's like on a vet min contract. He's an older backup swing tackle. They bring him back. They don't bring him back. I don't care. I expect that they will because, again, it's GM Aaron Rodgers.
That's true.
Yeah.
Let's talk about another player, quarterback, Trevor Siemian. Is he going to be coming back?
Hope not. I think they're going to go. From what I hear from the GM, first off, they're planning to ship off Wilson. I think they might get like a day 3 pick, maybe a 5th or 6th rounder for Zach Wilson. And if he does, cross your fingers for Zach that he goes to somewhere like St. Louis, where he can learn from a similarly arm-talented quarterback with an amazing, amazing head coach that knows how to make players like that work. So, like, cross your fingers for Zach. He ends up in a good landing spot. But they're supposedly going after a real veteran backup. My guess, I don't know, could be Jacoby Brissett. I don't know. I always like that guy. So they're looking for a real answer at backup quarterback just in case Aaron Rodgers gets hurt again or something like that.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, you need a veteran backup. There's going to be plenty on the market too as well. So we'll see what they decide to do.
Yeah, Jameis Winston. I love Jameis. That dude. That you guys all saw that interview with Jameis and the reporter, right? Oh my God, it was so good.
I can't stand Jameis.
Really?
Yeah, I can't stand that dude. He strikes me as such a me guy.
I don't get that sense at all. I just get the sense he's crazy.
Well, no, he's narcissistic. That's the biggest thing about him.
Yeah, I don't want him anywhere near my locker room if I'm a coach.
Do you imagine the conversations in the locker room between him and Aaron Rodgers?
Man. That makes my head explode even thinking about that.
That is just a win. Give us Hard Knocks again. Give us Hard Knocks 2 years in a row with Aaron Rodgers and Jameis Winston.
I don't even want to see that, but let's move on to special teams. I want to get to 2 of your special teams core players.
Yep.
Starting with your punter in Thomas Morstead.
Bring him back. That dude's a hell of a punter. That dude can run. I love him. There's no reason not to bring back a punter unless a couple of years. I don't know if you guys remember this. You're probably too young. Definitely, Brett, you're too young for this. Keith, do you remember when the Panthers used their franchise tag on their punter?
No, I don't remember that.
Like 2005 or something.
Yep.
Who was it?
I don't know.
Hey, listen, I remember that, but
it was the first time I'd ever heard of anybody using a franchise tag on like a punter. But they
I mean, I remember when the Raiders drafted like Sebastian Janikowski and then Shane Leckler.
Yep.
In the same draft.
Yeah.
But using a franchise tag on a punter is
the thing is the franchise number is so low. It was like $3 million.
Yeah.
Still,
but the Dolphins got rid of Morstead, and I didn't understand it. He was great for them last year.
Great punter.
And they brought in Jake Bailey, who was mediocre at best. So that was a loss for the Dolphins.
Yeah, no, we're gonna bring back Morstead.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to your last one on special teams in Greg Zuerlein.
Yeah. Greg the Leg, why not bring him back? If he wants to come back, bring him back. I have no problem bringing back. Special teams guys are so low. I mean, people bitch about like how running backs don't get paid relative to what they used to. Punters are making the same thing they were 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Punters were making like $1 million or $2 million 30 years ago. They're making $1 million or $2 million now. Like, fine.
Hey, I understand too. Let's move on. Let's talk about the other games in the wild card weekend. I don't want to get to the Bills just yet. I want to save them for the best.
A lot of foreplay here.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I got to do this. We got to stretch out the show a little bit. Wild card weekend is how it is. I can't talk just about the Bills for 30 minutes. We got 30 more minutes, guys.
You could. I could see you filibuster 30 minutes on the Bills.
Oh, I could fill, 4 hours if I wanted to, but it's not fair to you guys. That's the biggest thing. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to the fans and everything else. But let's talk about the other wild card games And let's talk about the.
Hold on. We had some chats that we need to get some comments that I would like to get to, and then I promise we'll get into those games. Let's do some of the chat.
No worries. Let's get to the chat. I do apologize, guys, for rambling a lot. I want to get to the chat a lot. We have a ton of comments that came in. Let's just start with everybody that's in the chat. I'm going to start from the beginning real quick. I won't get to all of them, but I'm just going to say hello to everybody. We have Battlehawk Superfan in the chat, as well as Tom S. Jim Page, thank you for tuning in. Bills fan CA coming in, as well as Red, White, and Bills. Great to see you guys as well. I saw John Robert in the chat, too, mentioning about Leonard Fournette being released. We will get into that a little bit later. But let me get into some of the more recent comments real quick. I will talk about this one here from Tom S. saying the Bills have way too many limping players hanging out in the IR slots. Completely agree with that comment there. Roy Collins, really appreciate you coming in. Mac Jones could be the backup for the Jets next season. That would be fun to see for the Bills. I think that would be great as well. Jim Page saying we need big-time offensive tackles for the Jets. Completely agree with that comment. Need to get a little younger at the offensive tackle.
When we get into like free agency and the draft stuff, we'll talk a lot about that because I have some thoughts.
Oh yeah. Tom S saying sorry to say Hamlin didn't fare much this season. I think he's more of a special teams value than you're expecting, but obviously on defense he hasn't done a lot, obviously because of Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer both being relatively healthy this season. Roy Collins coming in as well, saying that Pat McAfee was franchise tagged at one point as well. Good point there. As well as Battlehawk Superfan saying Hamlin to the UFL. I doubt that that's going to happen, though. As well as him saying that the most Jets roster I would not want on my Battlehawks.
That's okay. They like their NFL salaries. Nobody wants to play for $2,500 a game or something.
That's true. No, I completely agree. Well, let's move on to the other wildcard games that we're going to talk about. And I want to know the most surprising game of the week from you guys. Obviously, I imagine you guys are going to take Dallas and Green Bay as your pick. But
what are you asking us the question for if you're taking away our answers?
Well, I'm going to imagine you're going to say it. But I'm saying, let's talk about the surprise game, okay? Let's talk about the Packers game. And
okay, then just say that.
That's what I'm trying to get to. I know if I ask the question that's what you're going to say. So let's talk about the Packers and the Cowboys, and let's talk about the surprise that we saw. And I'll start with Keith. I mean, who would have expected Jordan Love to come out in the playoffs and play so well?
Yeah, it was. If you're not paying attention, it was surprising. But you know what? Going into that game, there were very few quarterbacks in the NFL that were hotter going into this game than Jordan Love. Getting Aaron Jones back was a boon for that offense. And I actually low-key love their receiving core. Between Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs and Reed, they're building something pretty good down in Green Bay. And they still have some pieces on defense like Kenny Clark and Preston Smith, who can get after the quarterback. This is a team that kind of found itself midway through the season. And will I surprise they beat the Cowboys? Absolutely, because beating the Cowboys in Dallas hasn't been an easy task this season. And the Cowboys, to me, were one of the best built teams in the league this season. But if you really look at it, the Packers kind of hit the Cowboys with a right uppercut really early on in that game. And the Cowboys just kind of staggered their way through it. They had no idea the Packers had that kind of punch in them. And when that happened, I don't think the Cowboys just ever recovered. This is also going to spell the end for Mike McCarthy in Dallas. I don't see how he survives this.
You don't think he's coming back next season?
No, I don't see how Jerry Jones brings him back after that. He's disappointed in every season he's been there. And this season in particular, this Cowboys team looked like they could really do something. And then they come out and lay an egg against the Packers. That's it for Mike McCarthy. I don't know who they're going to bring in to replace him. Bill Belichick, perhaps. But I think this is it for Mike McCarthy.
Can you imagine, though, Bill Belichick having to report to Jerry Jones and how
that's not going to work. I really think that would be a terrible idea.
I mean, just to take a little bit of pressure off of himself, be like, I'm not going to be the GM anymore. I'm not going to have full reins of the team. Obviously, when there's press conferences, what's Jerry Jones going to do? He's going to pretty much talk crap about Bill Belichick. That's what he's going to do. I don't see it happening. I mean, I think that a good spot for Bill Belichick would be either the Chargers or the Falcons. But
since Jimmy Johnson was fired from Dallas, Jerry Jones has had a habit of bringing in guys who are a little more milquetoast, guys who are going to be more apt to defer to Jerry and let Jerry kind of call the shots more or less. Yeah. Guys like, every guy they pretty much brought in, Wade Phillips was there for way longer than he ever should have been.
Yeah.
Jason Garrett was there for longer than he should have been. Chan Gailey, the list goes on and on. After Jimmy Johnson was fired, it was a bunch of dudes who didn't have strong personalities, and Bill Belichick is the opposite.
Yeah, completely agree. I can't believe you brought up Chan Gailey's name in that same sentence as obviously Wade Phillips.
Chan Gailey's been a coach for all three of our teams.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Dave Campo too. There were a lot of bad coaches for the Cowboys, and they were basically there.
Hard Knocks with Dave Campo. It was like the second Hard Knocks or something like that, and it's comic gold. It's amazing.
Yeah,
I'll never forget the one with Adam Jones and Carol Owens in it for the Cowboys. I mean, that one was pretty damn good, where they're pranking all the players with Tony Romo and everything. That was probably by far my favorite one to remember for Hard Knocks. But Anthony, I'm going to turn it over to you, man, and just talk about that game with the.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing coming out of that game is just like how much the Cowboys defense got rolled over.
Yeah.
Green Bay dropped 48 points on them. Dak turned the ball over twice. Sure. Why didn't they get any turnovers? Green Bay had 4 sacks. Mm-hmm. The Cowboys had 0. Where's Micah Parsons? What happened? They spent how many pick sixes did Deron Bland have?
Yeah.
5 this year?
Mm-hmm.
He got lit up for 110 yards on 6 targets or something like that. Yeah. Against Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Dubs or whatever. Holy cow.
Listen, he got a dub.
They got rocked.
I'm going to say
this. We can talk all we want about how Dak Prescott choked that game away, whatever. But 48 points on your defense.
I'm going to say this.
Go ahead.
How many open receivers did you see in that game? I mean, between Luke Musgraves and all the wide receivers that you saw, there was nobody in coverage on this game. I couldn't believe how many times that I saw an open receiver. I pretty much felt like it was a supermarket, or Oprah was giving away free receptions for them, because the Dallas defense was not there. It seemed like AT&T was down the whole entire game. They might need to find another cellular coverage for them, because there was nobody there on defense.
Yeah, I know that Jordan Love is hot. That's fair. But at the exact same time, let's please put a dagger in the heart of Dan Quinn as a head coach now. Please.
Yeah.
Don't see it happening, Anthony. I think he's going to Seattle.
No.
Yeah.
No, don't you speak. We didn't even get into it. Can you imagine? We talked about 6 head coaching vacancies last week. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as we get off, the next day, 2 more.
Yeah.
And then Nick Saban. We didn't even get to talk about Nick Saban. We need to talk about those at some point. There were 3 major NFL figures all sacked this week.
Yeah,
that's true.
And we haven't, and that's not even talking about the playoffs. This was a hell of a week for football. Dan Quinn, come on, no, never again.
No, you're exactly right. But let's talk about the other games, and obviously Bills fan CA coming in hot on his topic here. Let's talk about the Rams and Detroit game, because that was probably one of the best games of the week, in my opinion.
Oh,
I mean, listen, the anticipation of the game, number one, with Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff coming back to go against their former teams, it was incredible to see. Obviously, I felt like the atmosphere was going to be bigger, but you had tons of stars that were there. Obviously, Eminem there. Keegan-Michael Key was there as well. Listen, Barry Sanders always there. He always represents the team. But, I mean, listen, I can go on and on about them. But this game was probably, in my opinion, like one of those games where the momentum just kept going either way. And Detroit had the momentum in the beginning, but listen, the Rams were fighting hard until the end. And I felt like, the Rams were going to win it in the end, but, Detroit got their win. They are no longer the laughing stock of the league for having the longest playoff drought. Oh, you got to turn it over to a certain someone on the right-hand side of the screen here.
What up?
The Miami Dolphins are now facing the longest active playoff drought since now. It's going into the 2000s, okay? Let's just put it that way. It's now in the 2000s. So, obviously, Keith, I'm a little bit of a joke with it, but listen, let's talk about this game. And I want to start with Keith. Let's talk about this Lions game.
It was a fun football game to watch. Simple as that. It was, the two guys who were traded for each other, and whether or not it was a mutually beneficial trade, which I believe it was. And I thought both quarterbacks showed flashes. I think Puka Nacua really showed out in this game. Looked great, and it was just a fun game between two well-coached teams, one of which has a championship pedigree, which I think carried them to make this game closer than it otherwise would have been. It was a fun game to watch, and I'm psyched for the Lions. I'm psyched for the Lions fans to have finally gotten that playoff win, that get that monkey off their backs.
Yeah.
It was the best game of the weekend, and I think we knew it was going in. When we talked about it last week, we said, I don't think any of us really gave a prediction on how that game was going to go, because I don't think any of us really knew. It was such a tough game to predict, and it played out like that.
Yeah, it really did. And for it to fall down to a 1-point game in the end, yeah. I mean, listen, the spread on the game, I don't know if you guys follow a lot of spreads for the NFL, but the spread on the game was a 0.5 point, which made it even funnier because it ended up being a 1-point game. So I think Detroit was favored by a 0.5 point, and then it ends up being a 1-point game. Just makes it even better because the money line, could have been either way. Obviously, I felt like, the media was pushing for the Rams to win that game, and they weren't able to. We also have a special guest on the show, so I want to mention that. We talk about.
I don't know if you heard this scratching, but my daughter here doesn't like doors being open or being closed. So she just goes complete OCD and starts scratching on doors if she knows somebody's on the other side. So I just had to open it, and obviously she felt like she wanted to join the show.
Hey, listen, it's okay. Listen, hopefully she's not a Jets fan though, but I hope she's a Bills fan. But
she's okay. Ecuadorian. She likes soccer.
Oh, okay, that's even better. I appreciate that. So we can talk about that. So obviously, let's talk about the Lions and Rams game. But real quick before we do that, I do want to mention that I have to put her on the show now because she's made an appearance. We have our head of security in my dog Shiloh that always makes an appearance. Now we have your cat making an appearance. So now I got to fill that screen a little bit further. But let's talk about the Lions and Rams game, though, Anthony.
Yeah. So functionally, what I saw was that, again, similar to the Dolphins, the Rams are an under-talented team. They could not control the line of scrimmage at all. They got dented time and time again. And while the Lions didn't run for huge yardage chunks, they got shoved back on the line a lot. They got very little pressure. I know it says that they had 3 sacks, but it didn't feel like watching it. Aaron Donald was nowhere.
Yeah.
When I went and rewatched this game, Aaron Donald, to me, one of the things that's always stood out is his motor. He's got phenomenal technique. He's extremely explosive. He's freakishly strong, especially relative to his size. but like his effort's usually not the world's biggest problem. That's my other cat right now, and he's asking for dinner. Functionally, he's one of the most powerful players in the NFL relative to his size, and I saw him not even chasing backside runs. Like he was giving up on plays pretty frequently. In the second half, it seemed like the coaches got on him, but even still, like there were only a couple like plays where he even got into the backfield at all. And I've seen games, especially I remember that Super Bowl game where end of the fourth quarter, he's played like 70 snaps and it didn't matter. He's still full go. I don't know if it's because he's getting older. I don't know if it's because I couldn't tell you why, because they had everything to play for. I don't know. This is a 1-point game.
I'll give you a reason why. And I'm probably going to steal Keith's what he's going to say. So I'm going to let you, Keith, go first, obviously, because I have a feeling that it's going to be the same. So, Keith, go ahead.
I think it's a combination of age and desire. I think he was talking about retirement the past couple of seasons, and I think he's done. I think, that's the same reason why, and we'll get into the Eagles game, why during the tush push for the 2-point conversion, guys got lower than Jason Kelce. I don't think Jason Kelce wants to be out there anymore. I don't think Aaron Donald wants to be out there anymore. And I think I think we're kind of seeing a manifestation of that right now.
I actually disagree with what you're saying, Keith, in this one. I don't think that it was the motor or anything. Listen, I played football before. I'm an amateur football player at best, is what I would say. What I saw from Aaron Donald out there was a man that was every single play bullied around by the offensive line of the Detroit Lions. He was double teamed. He was triple teamed. They threw everything they had at him. And your motor, when you're not getting into the backfield as a defensive lineman, is going to go because you feel like, listen, what's the point? I'm not going to get there. So I understand where Aaron Donald's coming from. I don't think that it's about retiring or anything else other than he was chip blocks. There was guys that were pulling against him. They did everything they could by bringing running backs and tight ends in every position.
But Brett, this isn't the first time this has ever happened to Aaron Donald. He's been dealing with this entire career.
And you're right.
Split double teams. He used to. I mean, he used to fight. He wasn't. I'm telling you right now, if you go back and watch that game, their backside pursuits he used to chase down, he stopped.
No, and I agree with that. Listen, I agree with what you're saying there, but I'm also saying that the other thing is he was double and triple teamed as well. That's where I'm saying.
He was.
Listen, there's plenty of times that it happened, and I felt like, the effort and everything came down to the fact that the double and triple teams were happening so many times in this game. And give credit to the offensive line of the Detroit Lions and the offensive coordinator and Ben Johnson for making sure that the biggest focal point that they picked out in this game was to make sure that Aaron Donald did not get into the backfield. That's what I took out of this game. Obviously, the effort, that's a different story. He needs to put in a little bit more effort on the plays. He needs to chase down and everything. And I do agree with the defensive line coach for ripping him a new one, whether that was the defensive line coach or the defensive coordinator ripping him a new one. I imagine it would have been Raheem Morris ripping him a new one. But you don't half-ass plays ever when you're out there on the football field. And I did see a few plays where he was half-assing. So I will agree with you there. But I do think that there's a lot of plays where he was double and triple teamed.
Speaking of the Detroit Lions offensive line, I was watching Penei Sewell in that game, and he's so good. He's so damn good.
They've invested so well in that offensive line. That's the thing about Detroit. Like, that's why you can afford to have a Jared Goff.
Yeah. But there was a guy who said it, and I forget who even said it, but Penei Sewell came out the same year that Jalen Waddle came out. And when the Dolphins drafted Jalen Waddle, the guy said, I don't care if Jalen Waddle turns out to be a Hall of Famer. They should have drafted Sewell. I agree. Penei Sewell is so damn good, and he would help Dolphins offensive line out so much right now.
Yeah. Can you build from
man,
there?
watching him play, it's just it almost hurts watching him play because he could have been a Dolphin.
Listen, there's plenty of players that could have been on our teams, that we could go on and on and on about. But let's move on to, before we get into the Bills game, let's move on to the last game that we can talk about, which is the Bucks and Eagles game. And I'm going to say this too. Listen, I never expected the Eagles to be blown out, I would say, and just not show up for a game. I didn't expect that. I thought it was going to be a lot closer, especially with Big Dom returning as on the sidelines. But listen, being down 23 points, that's just not expected. So let's talk about the performance of the Bucks and how their defense played this in that game. So I'll start with Anthony.
All right. So functionally, what I liked about the Bucks is that that Todd Bowles coached a hell of a defense. The thing that makes me upset, I guess, is the fact that Todd Bowles was our head coach, and while he was our head coach, he didn't coordinate any of our games. He always had his friends coordinating. He had, I forget the name of his pal, but he brought him in as a defensive coordinator. And for 3.5 years, basically, we got none of Todd Bowles' defense because we just got his coordinator doing it, except when his coordinator's father died. And Todd Bowles had to coordinate the defense for 3 games. Those are the 3 best games that the Jets played on defense for his entire time that he was there. Also, let's talk about Baker Mayfield. The dude needs to get his flowers. What is this, year 6, year 7 in the league? It takes time to be a quarterback. That's why I get sick of people being like, Justin Fields, just throw him out. He's not it, clearly. It takes a long time to learn to be a quarterback. Jordan Love, I know this is his first year starting. He's been in the league for 3 years already. He's sat the whole time. Hasn't had his brains bashed in like Zach Wilson. Hasn't been subjected to the worst of the NFL. He got a couple of starts at the end of last year. He came in fresh and ready to play. It takes a long time to be good at NFL football. So Baker Mayfield, surrounded with a whole bunch of weapons, Godwin, Mike Evans, Cade Otton, whose initials spell cotton, just so you know. The decent offensive line, Rashad White, one of the emerging running backs in the NFL, and, hell of a defense. Absolute fantastic defense. This game, Keith alluded to it, the Bucks absolutely savaged the Eagles on both offensive and defensive line. They controlled the line of scrimmage for both sides. Keith was alluding a little bit to Jason Kelce looking bad. He didn't look good, that's sure. But neither did Lane Johnson. Lane Johnson got worked. Yeah. Lane Johnson got worked bad. And so did Jordan Mailata. And so did their left guard. Their entire offensive line collapsed. A lot of hay is going to be made about Jalen Hurts, but he was getting pressured in less than 2 seconds. I think 3/4 of the way into the game, one of the announcers was talking about, because obviously they have everybody has an analytics guy in their ear just to give them numbers or whatever. He was pressured on an average of less than 2 seconds.
Yeah.
3/4 into that game. There's no offense that can happen when you're under pressure that often. Obviously, he had the broken finger a week or two ago. So he's not going to be healthy regardless when he's trying to throw a spiral.
Didn't have A.J. Brown.
Offensive line was horrific. And then you go onto the other side, and the Bucks did a hell of a job denting the Philadelphia Eagles. They ran duo over and over again. They just double-teamed them up front and got to the next level. Rashad White was not touched in the backfield that I remember that game. It's not like he had to snap off 2 tackles in the backfield and then try to get something out of it. He had room to run. Baker Mayfield got some pressure, but goddamn is he good at just moving a little bit in the pocket. Just a little bit to the left, just a little bit to the right. All right, let's let this ball go. All right, let's put it up for K. Dotton to go get it. Like, and then everybody in the world wants to run the wide receiver screened cornerback missed tackle play. Everybody wants that. And that's what happened. Give it to Trey Palmer, who runs a 4.3 40, didn't do anything at Nebraska, but like you get him the ball at the line of scrimmage, cornerback misses a tackle and he's off for 70 yards. Like everybody wants that play. Why isn't that play in everybody's playbook, right? Like it just happens. So end of the day, Philadelphia got their ass kicked. And, you got to feel bad a little bit for Jalen Hurts. I hear a lot of people talking about fire Nick Sirianni. Like,
you don't fire somebody that takes you to the Super Bowl and then takes you to the playoffs the next season. That's just not happening. You really don't. Listen, do changes need to be made? Absolutely.
Maybe. Yeah. Absolutely. Especially defensive coordinator. Yeah. Especially defensive coordinator. Like, you can't be going from Matt or somebody else to Matt Patricia and consider that an upgrade. Holy cow.
No.
Get your mind out of the gutter. That's disgusting.
No, defensive side of the ball, there needs to be changes, obviously. But, I mean, I'm going to say this. Number one, I'll add into this, and then I'll let Keith go because I'm going to keep it quick. Number one, the Bucs are getting a hell of a deal from Baker Mayfield on that side of the ball. Listen, you're right about giving Baker Mayfield his flowers. He deserves it. He put up 2 1,000-yard receivers in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin again this season. When expectations were that Mike Evans was not going to be a number one receiver again, Chris Godwin was never going to be the same receiver that he once was with Tom Brady. And then to do that and then add in Cade Otton, who's having a hell of a season as well. And Rachaad White is looking like the focal point of the backfield for them as well. And then you add in this defense that has a hell of a lot of playmakers in Vita Vea as well as Councey, who's a rookie this season.
Elijah Councey, yeah.
Yep.
He was a stud that game.
Yeah.
Holy cow. His sack. I know they only gave him the half sack on that, but like the way he did the same thing that he did in Pittsburgh, where like he didn't even attempt to go after the guard. He just turns his back to him, jumps right through him, splits the guard and the tackle, and just freaking brings down Jalen Hurts. Like it was nothing. He was in the backfield before Jalen Hurts got the ball. It was phenomenal.
And he looked really good. I mean, I'll say that. And then you add in other guys like Shaq Barrett, as well as, let's start with this linebacking core. I want to talk about them because Devin White, who a few weeks ago was a healthy scratch because let's just be honest, I'm going to say it. He was bitching around a lot. He was bitching about a lot of stuff. He wanted a new contract and everything. Then he comes back to the Bucs, everything's okay. And, he's making plays. And Levante David is also making a ton of plays at his age in his NFL career. And it takes a lot of the pressure off of the backfield of the Bucs. But Antoine Winfield, let's just give him a lot of credit. He has been a phenomenal player throughout the season. Should have gotten All-Pro. But let me turn it over to Keith and let him talk about the Bucs as well as the Eagles. But before I do, I want to say a goodbye to one person in particular, in Jason Kelce, who's retiring from the NFL this week.
Did he say that?
Yeah.
Did that just come out? Are we breaking news?
No, this came out earlier on the day.
Yeah, it came out earlier today. He is announcing his retirement from the NFL. He's already told his teammates that he's going to retire. So I want to mention that. Obviously, hell of a player, though. And a long career, go spend time with your family. You have a beautiful family. You have 2 daughters that are incredibly adorable, And
he's got a future in podcasting.
Yeah, he's got a future in podcasting, just like us. From one podcaster to another, we wish you all the best, man, and go enjoy new heights.
Yeah, so the Eagles looked old. They looked old, and that doesn't manifest itself earlier on in the season. But as the season goes on, your old players start to look older and older. Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Jason Kelce, Lane Johnson, these guys just looked old. And as the season wore on, they looked worse and worse. The Eagles secondary that was getting gashed all night long by that Tampa Bay wide receiving core. James Bradbury looked terrible. James Bradbury was getting toasted towards the latter part of the season. Every single play, you just throw James Bradbury and you're going to get a reception. Darius Slay, he got hurt in that game, but even before then, he didn't look good. It's just the Eagles got old, and it didn't help. They played 20 games instead of 17 last year, so it happens. And the Bucks, like Anthony said, the Bucks worked them. Bucks worked them over good, and again, I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit here. I've been looking at the Eagles all season long as just pretenders. And I know I've gotten some crazy looks from people on this show. Look, I didn't see it. And it's one of those inexplicable things where you just don't see a team as being as good as everybody thinks they are. And that's how I saw the Eagles.
Yeah.
We'll see what they do next year. I don't think they should fire Nick Sirianni, but they need to get 2 new coordinators because Brian Johnson wasn't very good on the offensive side. Sean Desai that wasn't good on the opposite side, and I don't know what they were thinking of. I don't know what they're thinking of doing, hiring Matt Patricia. That was a really confusing hire. So
these Belichick guys, they just keep getting jobs, man.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is. Like they just has there been besides Saban, who worked with Belichick, like alongside Belichick, was a defensive coordinator when Belichick was a head coach.
Yeah,
with the Browns. Right?
Yeah,
25, 30 years ago. Like besides, has there been a single coordinator that went on to do anything relevant? Like Romeo Crennel was sometimes a decent defensive coordinator a couple of times.
Brian Flores did a nice job for the Vikings this year. I'll say that. But Brian Flores did a nice job for the Vikings. I didn't hate him with the Dolphins. He just doesn't have he has the interpersonal skills of Bill Belichick.
But they all do though. Like they all do.
Yeah.
They all think they're Bill Belichick, and then they're terrible. They fail.
Yeah. The list goes on and on between of all the Bill Belichick disciples that just, and they hired Gerard Mayo this week, and this isn't AFC East channel, so we should mention that the Patriots hired Gerard Mayo this week.
Yeah,
I said it in our Discord chat, and I'll say it again. Out of all of those Patriots disciples, out of all those Bill Belichick disciples that didn't work out, what makes a 37-year-old inside linebackers coach different from all those other guys? And this is a question for Chris first and foremost, but I'll pose it to you guys. What makes Rob Mayo any different from those guys? Because I don't see it.
Intelligence, more than anything. Intelligence. I mean, it comes down to that.
Yeah, but all those guys are intelligent, Brett. Like Eric Mangini was intelligent. Joe Judge was intelligent. Brian Flores is intelligent. All those guys are intelligent. What makes Rob Mayo different?
Understanding the game more than anything. I don't think that in certain situations that Eric Mangini understood the game. Listen, Gerard Mayo, we don't know if it's going to work out. Obviously, it was too early to tell. But one thing I will say is he understands, number one, the Patriots way. That's one thing. He also understands how to call a game because he was the middle linebacker for the Patriots for 8 seasons. Then he was under. Yes, he was. Don't get me wrong.
I'm not saying he wasn't. I'm just understanding. Like he's an inside linebacker. He doesn't call the plays. He literally yells the plays that he gets in his ear.
He calls the plays that they're telling him, so he understands how to see the game better.
Mike Singletary was a Hall of Fame middle linebacker. He was a garbage head coach.
He was.
Like, what does a middle linebacker have to do with anything?
I think you're trying to paint a rosy picture here, Brett.
I'm trying to pump up the Patriots fans, okay?
Yeah.
I'm trying to be nice because we don't
both of them out there.
You're trying to paint a rosy picture here, but I'm trying to paint a realistic picture here, and I think that's
we don't know.
That's what we should be doing. I don't see that as a good hire for the Patriots. I don't like the hire at all.
I think it's the only way the Patriots would have done it, to fire Bill Belichick.
You might be right about that.
Listen, that's the only way you're going to do it. So understand the move. I think that it will work out in the long run, but it's going to take a little bit of time to rebuild their defense. But I think the strength of the team is their defense and getting that area taken care of. But they need to figure out their offense. And if they keep Bill O'Brien, that's going to be one of the dumbest moves that you can possibly do because they need listen, they need to get some more points on the board. There's better offensive coordinators out there. You can go after somebody else, but you need to fix the offensive line, number one. You need to get younger on that offensive line with Trent Brown. You got to get rid of him. You also have to move on and get some playmakers, and they don't have any playmakers on their offense. So you got to see
what does that have to do with Bill O'Brien though? He can't catch, he can't block, he can't make anybody miss a tackle. Like, because Bill O'Brien at least was an extremely successful coordinator when he was with the Texans. And he's the only one, I would say, of the Bill Belichick guys that even had a modicum of success outside of New England.
Yes, but what has he done now? This is a now league.
You just said that they have no offensive line, no playmakers.
Yes,
what is he supposed to do?
I blame Belichick for that. Don't get me wrong. I blame Belichick 100% for that. But this is a now league, and let's just face it. I mean, the NFL is not for long. Okay, that's what it stands for. You don't produce, you're out.
What does that have to do with Brian, or what is it?
Bill O'Brien.
It's Bill O'Brien. So what does that have to do with Bill O'Brien? I'm trying to get. They've had an offensive coordinator. They've now had their third offensive coordinator in 3 years.
Yes, they have.
You're saying they're going to get better by firing their third offensive coordinator, going into their fourth offensive coordinator in 4 years.
Yes,
that's how they're going to get better.
Yes, by far. Because you know what? You need to get new people out in New England. You don't need to run the same regime with Josh McDaniels or Bill O'Brien or this.
They just hired a New England guy. Yeah. What are you talking about?
If you're going to stick with Mayo,
you need to start fresh with your staff. You need to get a new staff in there.
If they were going to start fresh, they shouldn't have hired Rob Mayo, Brett.
Yeah.
I agree. I 100% agree.
If I am Gerard Mayo, I'm keeping Bill O'Brien around because at least he's a stable former head coach, guy with a little gravitas in that locker room.
Mm-hmm.
I would keep Bill O'Brien, hire, I don't know who to be defensive coordinator, but if they're going to stick with this Patriot way type of attitude and idea of going about doing things, then you stick with Bill O'Brien because Bill O'Brien wasn't the problem this season, I don't think. Like you said it yourself, right? It was a lack of talent. There's only so much an offensive coordinator can do to offset a lack of talent. So you keep Bill O'Brien. If you're going to hire Gerard Mayo, then you keep Bill O'Brien because you're obviously just going to keep this in-house Patriot way thing going, which I wouldn't have done. I would have cleaned. I would have purged
everything that Belichick ever touched. Just throw it in the trash and start from scratch.
That's what I would have done. But if they're not going to do that, then keep Bill O'Brien. Absolutely.
Listen, I'm going to say this too.
Hire Josh McDaniel back?
No.
No, not that.
You can do
not that far.
I'm just going to say this too. If you're looking for candidates for offensive coordinator, there's a couple out there. I will do my research first of all before I mention anybody. But there's a few names that are out there that I would like to see them go after. But on defensive coordinator side of the ball, you have Ron Rivera. You also have Leslie Frazier that are out there. And I feel like the Patriots' way of doing things is by getting one of those two guys as their defensive coordinator because they are no nonsense and they do their job. And that's the way of doing business in New England. So I wouldn't mind seeing either Ron Rivera or Leslie Frazier as your defensive coordinator.
Ron Rivera's last two jobs were head coach and head coach.
Yeah.
He's not coming into New England to be a defensive coordinator for a 37-year-old head coach.
I agree. But Leslie Frazier, I think, would be the right choice. Don't get me wrong. I completely agree with you on Ron Rivera not wanting to do that. I think the only place that he would do it in is Buffalo, to be honest with you, because he has the same or a similar team to him with Sean McDermott being his head coach, and he taught Sean McDermott, and I feel like him being a assistant head coach would be a good spot for him there. But let's move on from New England. Let's talk about the last game. We are at the hour and 10-minute mark. Let's talk about the Bills and Steelers game because I don't want to really talk about it too much because it was one of those games where I felt like things could have been different, but I want to get into something before we even talk about the Bills and the Steelers. I want to talk about the weather, first of all, and talk about how well of a job that the grounds crew, as well as everybody that shoveled out there, did. This is a time frame of 12 hours, okay? Let me show you this real quick. This was 12 hours before the everything was shoveled out. This is what Highmark Stadium looked like. This is what Highmark Stadium was like when the Bills came to play. What a hell of a job that they did. Getting
if there's one city where you guys have experience shoveling snow, you're not going to find a lack of shovels or people that know how to do it in Buffalo. Let's be clear.
Who would have expected that? I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, when I saw the way the stadium looked like on Friday night or Saturday night, I'm sorry, I did not expect for the Bills to be able to get this game kicked off. I really didn't. And then to see all the Bills fans throwing snow all over the place, it was pretty damn cool to see. And I love the comments from Terry Pagula saying that one of the highlights that he saw was Bills fans just throwing snow after touchdowns. It was great to see. But let's talk about this game a little bit. And Keith, I'm going to start with you, man. I want to talk about, obviously, the performance that you saw from the Bills, but also the performance that you saw from the Steelers.
Well, I like the grit the Steelers played with, but that's not unusual for a Mike Tomlin coach football team. They always play with grit. They always play with fire in their bellies. But at the end of the day, without T.J. Watt on the edge, without a starting quarterback, they were just undermanned, and they were not the better team, and it showed. Josh Allen played well, had a great missed tackle and touchdown in that game. Stephon Diggs kind of came back into himself a little bit. Looked like the Stephon Diggs of old. It was a dominant victory by a better football team. The Steelers fought for as long as they could. But as a Dolphins fan who wasn't cheering for the Bills at all in this game, the Steelers never gave me hope that they were going to pull off an upset in this one.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Hey, Keith, I just want to ask you real quick. Check the private chat real quick. There's a comment that's in there. I just wanted you to see it real quick. But Anthony, let me know your thoughts on what you saw from the Bills-Steelers game.
It seemed like a series of unfortunate events for the Steelers. Like the interception, the red zone, like they were at like the 5-yard line or something like that. They just couldn't get out of their own way. And that's what happens, one, when you're on the road, and two, when you have Mason Rudolph as your starting quarterback. Like they were, make no mistake, they were one of the teams with a zombie starting quarterback in the playoffs. This is one of the issues, I think, with having so many teams in the playoffs. You're just going to get teams that don't have quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And that's what it looked like to me. They couldn't get anything going on the ground. The Bills plugged all the holes in the run in their run fills, and then Mason Rudolph wasn't able to get the ball off fast enough most of the time, and he was just not accurate enough to do what Tua does. And the receivers couldn't really get open, and functionally the game was really never within doubt for the Bills. That said, it doesn't help that they didn't have TJ Watt, who you could make the argument is the best defensive player in football, with 19.5 sacks this year. So, they couldn't get a whole lot of pressure on Josh Allen. And the thing about Josh Allen is that, this as well as anybody, and so do all the Bills fans. If you can give Josh Allen a credible fear of pressure, it doesn't have to be pressure every time, but if you can give him the credible threat of pressure, you can get to his head. And if you can get to his head, you can make him make some mistakes.
Yeah.
That was what would have been necessary for the Steelers to win. They would have needed to credibly get into or credibly threaten Josh Allen into mistakes, whether that's, Highsmith or TJ Watt just tearing off on the outside and then collapsing the pocket and hitting him when he's not looking. But, if Josh Allen gets through the first 2 quarters or so and you haven't gotten into his head and he kind of gets comfortable and he just starts taking off and doing all those little things that Josh Allen does, I mean, it turns into big things like 40-yard run or something like that?
52-yard run.
Yeah, 52-yard run. Like, it's just going to happen when you can't generate pressure and you can't get into his head and he ain't scared.
No.
He'll sit in the pocket or he'll take off. And if he gets comfortable, that's too much of a problem. So, yeah, functionally, it was, again, the Steelers being a relatively under-talented team with no quarterback. And hopefully, Tomlin gets himself a quarterback because, how many years is he going to be able to do this?
Yeah.
Barely above 500. Why would he want to consistently have to fight tooth and nail and scratch out 9 and 10 win seasons?
Did you see his press conference?
What's that?
Did you see Tomlin's press conference?
I didn't.
Did you see it, Keith, or no?
I saw the end of it when I saw the end of it. He announced he's coming back again for another season.
Yeah.
So
he's coming back, but the funny part about it was he was asked a question about his contract and walked out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was pretty much what it seemed like. It made it seem like that was the only question that was asked, and he walked out, but that's not the way that it was.
If you're Mike Tomlin, they offer you a contract to even take it. Look at the teams that they've been giving you. You could have your pick of any team in the NFL after next season.
I honestly
think you want to come back to a GM that's consistently drafting poorly, consistently saddling you with you watch Joe Flacco come off of Kurt Warner bagging groceries duty and drop 300 bomb after 300 bomb and get the Cleveland Browns to the playoffs. And you've got Mason Rudolph, and they used a first-round pick on Kenny Pickett. And they drafted Najee Harris in the first round. Meanwhile, the backup that was an undrafted free agent last year is more explosive and better. How many years in a row can you do that?
Years now with Mike Tomlin. It might be beneficial for both sides to just move on from one another. A la the Eagles and Andy Reid.
It's clearly more beneficial for Tomlin.
Yeah,
by far. But
Steelers fans, if you ask people in Pittsburgh, they want Tomlin gone for some reason.
It's complacency. They haven't seen bad football in their lifetimes. It's like the Green Bay Packers fans with quarterbacks.
Yeah,
they haven't seen it in their lifetime. I can't remember a time that they were consistently bad football team because my earliest memories of were the Bill Cowher years.
Yep. Yeah. Bill Cowher, Cordell Stewart,
Cordell Stewart. Even before that. Then they had
Neil O'Donnell,
Dick LeBeau as their defensive coordinator. Kevin Green and Joey Porter screaming off the edge. They don't know what bad football looks like unless they watch Cleveland.
And they don't know what firing a head coach looks like because they've never done it. Pretty much every head coach is retired.
They've had 3 head coaches since that dude that they had since Chuck Noll.
Yeah.
Every coach gets 20 years with them.
Yeah, which is surprising. But let's talk about the offense of the Bills too, because I felt like this was a resurgence from all the other playmakers that the Bills had outside of Stephon Diggs too. Khalil Shakir stepping up on a play that should have been wrapped up by Minkah Fitzpatrick, obviously, but I think that's why mostly the Dolphins wanted to move on from Minkah is because he can't wrap up as much. So just making a joke, obviously, Keith. But let's talk about him. Let's talk about Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox being the only tight end duo to have a touchdown in a playoff game. Also, other playmakers that stepped up for the Bills as well. But let's talk about the offense. And I'll start with you, Keith. What did you see from the offense of the Bills?
It looked good. They I don't think it was overly inventive. I don't think they pulled out all the stops in this one. They didn't have to, not against the Steelers. But they looked good. Josh Allen did Josh Allen things, and Dalton Kincaid did Dalton Kincaid things, and Stephon Diggs looks good again. And they were just a better team overall than the Steelers. They didn't have to play their best football game. I think that's the bottom line. They didn't have to pull out all the stops for this one. They got another home game against Kansas City next week, and I expect to see a little more innovation in their offense, a little bit more, a few more wrinkles to their offense against the Steelers, because they're just a superior football team than the Steelers are.
Well, one thing I saw, I'm going to say this right now: injury after injury after injury for the Bills. I mean, we lost Terrell Bernard. You lost Stephon Diggs for a little bit of time. A few other players went out as well. Connor McGovern for a couple plays. The Bills just had a ton of injuries in this game, and they overcame that. So all the adversity and all the backups stepping up, AJ Klein stepping up too, that was incredible to watch. But I felt like the Bills explosive playmakers outside of Stephon Diggs really came together in this game, and they played pretty good. Obviously, there was times where, like Roy Collins said, that there's times where the Bills offense did sputter a little bit, and I do agree with that. And they could have done a better job. But this was a game without any of the injuries, and I believe that if guys like Matt Milano were in the game, and other Bills that were out, like Rasul Douglas, I felt like this game could have been a blowout for the Bills. But injuries happened, and they let the Steelers back in the game. Would you agree with that, Anthony?
I don't know if they let them back in the game. The Steelers still only scored 17 points.
Yeah,
they did, but it was a one-score game.
No, it wasn't. At no point in the game was it one score after they got 2 touchdowns.
Look, I'll say this, Brett. You can say they let them back in the game, but it never felt like the Steelers were fully back.
It didn't. Functionally, what happened was that the Steelers struggled to move the football because they don't have a quarterback. And I know you want to talk about the Bills' offense. They did score 31 points, but they did so on 368 yards. It's not like they just marched down the field over and over again. They got good field position. The Steelers couldn't move the ball. And they slowly, over the course of the game, like an anaconda, squeezed the life out of the Steelers. That's how I saw the game. I didn't see the game as being like some offensive, like 200 yards passing and 79 yards rushing from Josh Allen, which is a Josh Allen-y kind of game to win. But they were under no threat of losing that game. The announcers tried to make it a little bit more interesting than it needed to be, because that's what announcers have to do. But the game was never in doubt. No. The Steelers could not.
At one point, it was a one-possession game. It was
24-17. I saw that, yes.
Yeah, so it was 24-17. So I do want to add that to the equation. Obviously,
I still didn't think the Steelers were going to come back. And 24-17, it felt like 31-17. It felt like 24-14.
There was a lot of injuries though for the Bills, and
there were injuries for the Steelers too. I know you want to build up the how bad like the injuries were for the Bills. I get that.
Right.
But like you have a quarterback and they don't.
Take the compliment. The Bills were a much better team than the Steelers. That game never felt like it was in doubt.
Yeah.
Just take the compliment.
And
I'm gonna ask everybody in the chat. I mean, did you feel like at all that the game was in doubt and that the Bills were starting to lose momentum in the game? Let us know in the comments below.
As soon as the Bills went up 14-0, that game was over.
Yeah. It was never going to be a track meet. That team was never – the Steelers were never going to catch them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I felt like a little bit differently than most people felt, because being a Bills fan, I felt that pressure of the way the game was
going. Being a Bills fan is the operative part of that. If you watch that game as a neutral, it never felt in doubt.
Yeah. I mean, we'll agree to disagree, guys, but we're at about the hour and 24 mark. We will definitely be wrapping up the show, guys. Let's go over final thoughts real quick.
Well, no.
Look at this, Roy. In doubt, hell no.
Yeah. and Sean says the game was over 7-0. You know, I won't go there exactly, but once Josh Allen threw that touchdown pass to Dalton Kincaid down the middle, you know, looked super easy. Looked like it was just an easy pitch and catch touchdown. Once that happened, it's like, okay, this one's over.
Then the Steelers, they march down the field, and Mason Rudolph throws the interception in the end zone.
Yeah, it's Kyrie Elam, no
the
less.
game was done. Like I can say that yes, the Bills could have stepped on the gas. It would have been if they had stepped on the gas, if they were able to go up 21-0, 28-0, then yes. But like the game, once Rudolph pissed away that touchdown at the end, the game really wasn't close.
I started to see Najee Harris start to run the ball a little bit better. The Steelers were starting to move the ball a little bit more towards the end of the game, especially with some of the injuries that we did see. That's why I felt like if the Bills...
Najee Harris averaged 3.1 yards per carry.
He did.
Jalen Warren got a few good rushes.
He was never running the ball well.
No, but towards the end of the game, when the Bills defense was on the field a little bit more, I felt like that what could have happened is if the Bills stalled on offense, that it could have the Steelers could have came down the field and they could have made it a tied game. I mean, I'm just saying that as a Bills fan because I've seen it many times, and it could have happened.
Even all of the Bills fans in the chat are like, no, it wasn't really in doubt.
No, what I'm saying is that like Sean is saying here. What I'm saying is that we lost half our defense that started the game, and the game started to go into the momentum of the Steelers. I'm not saying at the beginning of the game. I'm saying towards the end of the game. That's what I felt like. But let's wrap things up, guys. Let's do our final thoughts real quick and wrap up the show, and we will see you guys next week for another edition of the AFC East Summit. But I'm going to start with Keith wrapping things up.
It's... You know, I gave a eulogy for the Dolphin season earlier on in the show. I had a lot of fun this season as a Dolphins fan, but ultimately they weren't good enough. So in upcoming episodes, we're going to get into how the Dolphins can get better and how we can turn them into actual contenders in the AFC. As far as the rest of the season goes, I'm looking forward to this divisional round. Should be a lot of fun. Should be a good football show. Should be a good football weekend, I should say. Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a great week. You have in the AFC side of things, obviously, Mahomes versus Allen and Stroud versus Lamar Jackson. So 2 good games there. Then on the other side of things, you got Baker Mayfield going up against
Jared Goff.
So you got Jared Goff there, and then you also have Brock Purdy going up against now I forgot who it is. I can't even think of who it is now.
Jordan Love.
Yeah. That's right, Jordan Love. I couldn't even think of his name, but I was like, who do they have in Green Bay? Oh yeah, it's that kid that can sling the ball off.
Brett Favre.
Oh, it's just the guy that can sling the ball off his back foot, just like Aaron Rodgers can. So
Brett Favre.
Brett Favre, yeah. So obviously
Rodgers.
So good games, but Anthony, what's
final thoughts? Just looking forward to seeing some more decent football this week. I pray for the health of CJ Stroud. That Baltimore defense is a pack of savages. So I just want to see. I want to see CJ Stroud do his best to show out. I think he's a hell of a quarterback, but on the road against Baltimore, I don't know what to do. Kansas City at Buffalo is going to be the game to watch this week, I think. I can't stress this enough. They did beat the Chiefs at Arrowhead, but this version with Rashee Rice finally coming into his own might be a pretty big test, I think, for the Bills defense, because I do think that the way that they're currently constructed right now, the Chiefs might be able to keep pace.
And with the way that the Chiefs defense is playing too, I'm not going to lie. They're playing.
George Karlaftis was an absolute beast. They caved the pocket over and over and over again against the Dolphins.
I noticed.
So let's see how good this Bills offensive line actually is.
Yeah. Let's do real quick last segment that I want to do. Upsets this week. Do you have any upsets?
By upset, I don't know what the lines are right now.
I'm saying overall, do you expect?
I think
do you expect the 49ers to win? Do you expect the Lions to win? And just straight up.
I could see the Chiefs beating the Bills. I could see there's a scenario where that happens, and I can see the Bucs upsetting the Lions. I don't see the Texans being the Ravens, and I do not see the Packers upsetting the 49ers.
I actually think that the Packers might be able to upset the 49ers. I think the 49ers are a little bit leakier than they should be on defense right now. And I think that the Packers are, I don't know, maybe they got something going with this Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson one catch a game thing going for them. Like, maybe they can. Like, I don't, if they turn it into a track meet and like the 49ers have to keep pace, I don't know. I would think it probably should be the 49ers because they did rest McCaffrey for like the last 3 weeks of the regular season or 2 weeks of the regular season. And then they had the first week off. So he hasn't played in a while. They might, I don't know. Who knows? But there's the world that exists where that's the case. And then also the Lions being upset by the Bucs is entirely possible. The Bucs aren't scared, and the game's in the dome, so it's not like weather is going to matter too much. Right. I know it's a home game, but weather was the biggest factor in I think 4 of these games this past week. So like, if there is none, Baker's got nothing to be afraid of in the cold.
That's true. Last question, guys. This is going to be the fastest one that you'll possibly ever have. Okay. 1 word answer. Do you think that Taylor Swift will be at the game against the Bills?
I'll give you 3 words. I don't care.
Very simple answer. Anthony.
Sure.
Hey, listen, I'm going to tell you this much. I don't know how many of you guys have been to Buffalo, but the hotel rooms in Buffalo are not going to be the same as the ones that she's going to get in Kansas City. So
she's going to stay in Toronto and jet over.
There you go.
That very well could happen, though. I know you mentioned that, obviously, but I just had to get that out there. But all right, guys, we are at the hour and 32-minute mark. We appreciate everybody for coming into the comments. If you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on social media. You can find Nickel City Mafia on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, as well as on Discord as well. You can go on their Discord, which is in the private chat. Drop in and make your comments and talk to the guys from Keith and Anthony, as well as myself, on there as well. Also, don't forget that you can find the Go Bills podcast on all different social media platforms, but you can also find all the shows that we will be doing throughout the week on the Go Bills podcast website as well. For Anthony and Keith, I'm Brett. We will see you next Tuesday at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Until then, Go Bills.
I'm not even going to say jet up. Shout out to Roy Collins in the chat. We agree on many things.
Sounds good, guys. Until next time.